Hey everybody, it's Ronnie. Welcome back to the 9th video in my True Chilling Tales. This video I want to share with you a bunch of sort of random memories of experiences that I had. If you've been following this series, you know that the first 8 videos were all kind of isolated experiences, and they were all sort of, I don't know, I don't want to say that they're major stories, but they're bigger stories and bigger experiences. The experiences I'm going to share with you today are smaller experiences, and so I didn't want to make a video for each one of them, and I thought, well, I'll just combine them all into one video. So these things are maybe a little bit less chilling, but they're still a little bit on the mystifying side or the intriguing side, and they're things that I definitely wanted to share with you. So I'll start off by telling you that when I was really, really little, like 3 years old, I remember more than once being at my grandmother's house and seeing through my peripheral vision out of the corner of my eye figures of people who were they were like completely white, almost like a glowing white. They had no gender and like no hair and no facial features, but I just remember seeing these people out of the corner of my eye and not being afraid of them. I was kind of aware of them and I kind of just accepted them. And I have that memory twice. I have two memories of seeing those people out of the corner of my eye. So that's the first thing I wanted to share with you. It was kind of interesting. And then and so we're going to flash forward to when I was about 10 years old. My brother and I still shared bunk beds, as you may recall from the first video with the cloaked beings. And in this particular time, we lived in a different place. We still had the bunk beds, and I was about 10 or 11 in the 5th grade, right towards the end of my 5th grade year and going into the summer. And I remember like laying in bed, and I started hearing a scratching, like a finger scratching right under my ear. And for a while, I would be like drifting off into sleep, and I would start hearing this scratching sound. And then I would kind of remember it in the morning, like, wow, I think I heard this. And then I remember one night, as I was drifting off into sleep, I heard it, and I kind of came out of drifting into sleep, and I kind of woke up, and I could still hear it. And I remember looking down at the bottom bunk and seeing my brother fast asleep, and I kept on hearing this scratching sound, and it kind of freaked me out. I didn't like it. And we didn't have mice or anything like that, and there was some kind of a platform or something that the mattress laid directly on. And it was always like right under my ear, which was really, really odd. So I remember one night I had this little, this tiny little Bible, and I stuck it under my pillow, and the scratching sound stopped. And so from that night forward, I always slept with the little Bible under my pillow until we moved. My mother met the person who is now my stepfather, and we were moving in with him and his family. And so the first week that we were there, we weren't quite moved in, and I was sleeping on the couch. And I remember the first night sleeping on the couch, I heard this scratching sound again. It followed me, and I remember like thinking that it was, there was something there that was tormenting me and like scratching. So I heard it the first night and maybe the second night, and I remember that one of my stepbrothers, in his bedroom, he had a print of a portrait of Jesus Christ. The really famous one where he's kind of in prayer and looking up. It's a really famous image of Jesus. But he had that in his bedroom, and so I went and took it, and I slid it under the couch. And the night that I slid it under the couch, there were no scratching sounds. And then I remembered to bring my little Bible with me, and so I would also have that under my pillow, and whenever I had, then the scratching sound stopped, basically, and I never experienced them again. And eventually I stopped, putting the Bible and the picture under my bed. But it's kind of a strange memory. I still remember that. And then going forward, when I lived in Edmonds with Raven, we shared an apartment in Edmonds, which is the Seattle area, and we were about 19 years old, and we were bored one night, and we decided that we wanted to drink. We wanted to get intoxicated, and we were too young to buy alcohol ourselves, and we didn't know anybody that would buy alcohol for us. So we had the brilliant idea of getting drunk off of cough syrup. I'm a little embarrassed to share that with you, but it's the truth. And so we were at the grocery store, the two of us, and we were sort of like scanning the different kinds of cough syrup as if, like scanning your liquor bottle. And we were trying to figure out which cough syrup to get drunk off of. The things that you do when you're 19, right? So we're standing there, and all of a sudden, this bottle of cough syrup literally flies off the shelf at us and hits the floor. And that in itself was really weird. But the other thing that was really weird is that there was a woman nearby. Like she was just, not far from us at all, and she saw it. And she looked at us and she said, "Well, somebody must be looking out for you." And Raven and I both looked at each other because we felt like this woman knew somehow that we were planning to, buy this cough syrup for, a purpose other than making us better. So that was kind of strange. And during that same period, while we lived with each other, we had in our bathroom, we had a stackable washer and dryer. And I was doing laundry one day, and Raven was in the doorway, and I was putting clothes either into the washer or taking them out. I can't remember. But the dryer hadn't been used yet, and the dryer door was shut. So as I'm leaning over the washer with the clothes, the dryer door flew open and hit me in the head. I think it hit me in the head, but the door definitely flew open, and it was shut, and it wasn't like it was running and somehow it popped open with the clothes in it at all. It was still, and the door flew open. And there was one more thing that happened while we lived in that apartment. We had a little table with the stereo on it, the CD player on it. We had some CDs. And I remember one day I had my copy of Madonna's Ray of Light, and it literally just flew right off the table. And Raven and I both saw that as well. So for some reason, whatever it was about us living in Edmonds, we had things sort of flying off, by themselves, which is kind of strange. And while I lived there, I remember one night I got a call from my little brother Marshall at the time, who was about 16, and he was living in Central Oregon, where he lives now. And he called me one night, and he was really upset. He was really upset by an experience that he had, and he shared it with me over the phone, and he proceeded to tell me that he had bought this blank cassette tape, and it was a brand new tape. He had opened it up that day, brand new from the store, and he used to do these really good impressions. He was able to kind of change his voice, and so he was recording and doing some stuff like that, and he had rewound the tape and was listening to what he had recorded, and as the tape ended, you could hear where his recording stopped. So you kind of heard that click that then led into the sound of just the blank tape running. And it was near the end of the tape, and he told me that as the tape ended, just before it ended, after this long pause of silence that hadn't been recorded yet, there was a voice that said, "Hello," in a really kind of creepy way. So he's telling me all this, and it's kind of intense on the conversation that he's explaining it to me, because he's just experienced it and it freaked him out. And he actually played it for me. I remember that he held up the phone to the speaker and played this recording for me. And I remember hearing this voice say hello, and I remember it sent shivers all up and down my body and gave me goosebumps. it didn't sound like a normal human voice. It was definitely there. It was definitely audible. And if you've ever watched one of those TV shows or seen a movie where they like record a ghost, they go somewhere with their equipment and they record a voice of a ghost, and it doesn't quite sound normal. It sounds, it's clear, but it's distorted and it's not quite human. I can't really describe it, but I remember it sounded really creepy, and all it said was hello, but it wasn't like a friendly hello. And it wasn't necessarily a sinister hello. It was just a really creepy hello. So, yeah, that was also a really interesting experience. So then the following year, I moved back to the North Olympic Peninsula, and I was house sitting for my friend Erin Marie, who experienced the black mass of energy with that you might have saw in a previous video. So she was out of town, and her parents were out of town, and I was house sitting for them for I don't remember if it was just for one night or if it was for the weekend, but I was there alone, and for some reason they had a freezer out in like the garage or the shed or something, and for some reason I had to go out there to get food. I don't remember why I had to keep going out there, but there was a few times where I had to go out to the freezer to get the food. I think that they had like been hunting, and I don't know why I had to go out to the freezer to get this meat or this food or whatever it was. But I remember that Erin's mom, before she left, they had the key to the freezer in the house on the fridge on a magnet. It was sort of this magnet with the key that sort of slipped into the little pocket. And it was one of those kind of big freezer keys. It was kind of triangular, and then at the base of it, it was round, and then you unlocked it that way. And she told me, whatever you do, don't lose this key. And so I was really conscious of the key every time I used it, and I kept it in my hand and would go and unlock the freezer and come back into the house and put it in its spot. And I remember on the last day, the key vanished, and I looked everywhere. I mean, I went out to the shed. It wasn't, it wasn't anywhere. It was just this key somehow vanished, and I know that I put it back. Because I was conscious of it each time I had the key. I unlocked the freezer. I put it back. So it really mystified me, and it really bothered me that this key disappeared, because she told me specifically not to lose this key, and it wasn't like I had set the key down somewhere else. I mean, I know that I put it back, and to this day, whenever I see her, I don't see her that often, but I always ask her, did you ever find that key? And it's never turned up, and that was like 12 or 13 years ago. So it's kind of odd. And then going back before I moved to Edmonds, when I was living with Janine. The story about the photograph, when I was living in that house with Janine, her dog King was her partner's dog, and he ended up passing away. And he passed away, I think, actually after I moved. So maybe he was still living. I don't remember if he was living or if he was deceased, to be honest with you, when this happened. But I remember that one day, King, this dog, on his back, he was a blonde. I don't know what kind of a dog he was, but he had blonde hair, and the fur on his back, the lighter fur, formed into a perfect design of an eagle formed on his back, and there was no mistaking it. It was a perfect silhouette of an eagle. I mean, the face turning with the profile and the beak, and sort of the wings and the body. And I remember it was one of the most amazing things I ever saw. This natural eagle formation forming on this dog's back. It was absolutely astounding. It was amazing, and I wish that I had taken a photo of it, but I didn't. So all I can do is tell you about it. So years later, when I was living in Port Angeles, I want to say this was in the last decade. So this is like 2005, 2006, somewhere in there. Erin, Marie, and I had gone from Port Angeles to Port Townsend. We were hanging out in Port Townsend, and we were in Sirens, this bar called Sirens, a really popular bar there in Port Townsend, and um, before you go into, well, you go up these stairs, and then there's sort of an entryway before you get into the bar, and in the entryway is where there's like where the restrooms are, and there's these big message boards. So I was waiting. Erin was in the restroom, and I was waiting to go into the restroom, and I was standing there looking at the message boards on the wall, and I felt a couple of people walk past me, and like right behind me, and I turned and looked as a natural, just naturally to see who walked past me, and there was nobody there at all. Um, so that was kind of a trip, and I knew right away. It's a really old building. I knew right away that there were a lot of spirits or presences roaming around in Sirens in Port Townsend. Um, so then I moved to Oakland in 2007, and I didn't really experience anything unusual for a long time. I kind of felt like all of the things that I've told you about in the previous videos, all of these sort of intense, crazy, bizarre, really unexplainable situations were kind of specific to my life in the North Olympic Peninsula, because they just seemed to stop happening once I moved to the Bay Area. But last fall, like last September, well, let me tell you, I work for a church. I work for an old church. It's a very large, spread out church, and it was built in 1926. It was finished being built in 1926, so it's been around for a long time. And I never felt or sensed anything unusual or anything strange in the church, and I had never seen anything. So I started working there 4 years ago, and people in the past that I've known, and some of the people who are still there, have told me that they had seen things and they had shared a few experiences with me, but I never had any experiences, and I thought, well, that's strange, because I'm prone to having these sorts of experiences, and other people are telling me that they're seeing things, and I'm not. So I never really thought much about it. However, one of my friends at the church has some psychic abilities, and she can see spirits out of the corners of her eyes in her peripheral vision, sort of like how I was telling you when I was a little toddler and I saw the white people or the white beings out of the corner of my eyes. She can see spirits, and so she's told me that she has seen people in the sanctuary, and that's where a lot of the other people who have claimed to see things have seen it. So if you're not familiar with the sanctuary, with the church, maybe you're watching this and you know the church and you know what I'm talking about. But if not, the sanctuary is really big, and on either side of the room there are these sort of walkways with these pillars, and so people have seen, spirits or energies kind of like walking back and forth through the pillars, like past the pillars, and on the right hand. If you're in the sanctuary, the right-hand hallway that borders the sanctuary, there's another hallway that leads to the other side of the church. And in the hallway of the sanctuary, there's a motion light, so that if you go back there in the dark, there's kind of a corridor that wraps around behind the sanctuary. So it's very dark, even during the day. So there's motion lights that come on to illuminate. And then they only come on when somebody walks through there. So this one day last fall, it was a Tuesday, I remember, and it was a fairly quiet evening. I didn't have many tenants. I have renters, people who come in and rent space in the evening, and so I had been alone in the church, and I had already been back on that side of the building and knew that there was nobody there, and so I think I had two renters that were there that evening, and they had started their function on the other side of the church. And I remember going to check out the building, and when I went down the hall towards the sanctuary, I could see that the light was on, like somebody had been down there, and I thought, well, that's really strange, And so I went back there and inspected, and there was nobody back there, and I didn't really think much of it. And then it happened again. And I was like, I've already gone back here. Who's back there? And again, I went back there again, and there was nobody. And I'm kind of at night while I'm there. It's my job to sort of be aware of who's coming in and out of the church. And I hadn't seen or noticed anybody come into the building or go to that side of the building, and there was no other activity in. Normally if somebody from the church would come and go back there, a light from another room would be on, but it was all dark except for the motion light. And so I started to think, well, maybe it's a presence. Maybe there's something, going on. So the partner of the person who I told you about, who can see out of her peripheral vision, her partner was there. And so after her function, when she was about to leave, I was telling her about my experience with the light that day, and we were standing at the end of the hallway, and so at the other end of the hallway, the door was open, I could see into the sanctuary, and the light was off, and as I was telling her what I was just telling you, the light came on, and I was like, oh my god, it just happened again, and I actually saw the light come on, there was nobody back there, and aside from that day, that's never happened before, and it's never happened since. It was only that day that the motion light was coming on by itself. Very strange. So it could have been something electrical, but then you would think that it would have been happening before and after that as well. So kind of strange. I don't know. Don't know for sure what it was, but definitely an interesting story to share. And then this spring, earlier this year, I was at home here, sitting right here where I'm making this video, and it was, how can I explain this to you? It was spring, and my apartment actually stays pretty warm by itself, so I hadn't the weather was starting to get nicer, and I hadn't turned on the heat in a while. I hadn't touched my heater, and it was a rainy day. It was like a rainy Saturday. And in my apartment, I only have one window, and it's a sliding glass door. And the fan in my bathroom had stopped working. So I had opened my my window and had taken a shower and for circulation. And so I got out of the shower, and the window was still open, and it was pouring rain, and it was nice. It was refreshing. It was it wasn't really cold, But I came out. I was completely naked again. I sat down right here where I'm sitting here, and I was checking my email, and all of a sudden, the heater came on. And the heater actually, again, it's just a round knob that you actually have to physically turn it. And so the heater came on. And I had been home all morning. It was like my day off, and so I actually showered much later in the day. It was like, maybe 1 in the afternoon. And I was really mystified by the fact that my heater turned on. In fact, I even left a post on Facebook, like, my heater just came on, all by itself. But I had this sense when it happened, I felt like it was, I don't know, I felt like it was somebody who knew me, who was maybe like looking in on me and sort of turned the heater on as if to say, here you're naked and the window's wide open and it's raining and it's cold and you should be making yourself warm. So it felt nice. It felt really benevolent, and it felt like maybe like a friend. I've had a few friends who have passed away, so I don't know. It seemed kind of comforting in a way. And shortly after that happened, a few weeks later, I had gone to my day job. So during the day, I work for a woman that I clean for. And it was the last day of the week. So I don't work for her on Fridays, so it was a Thursday. And she was gone, and I was cleaning her house. And she had, at the time, she had one cat, and he was a really old cat, and he's since passed away. And in the bathroom, she had an extra water dish for him, and in the water dish there were 2 blue marbles. And I had cleaned this and, water dish out, emptied it out, and filled it up several times during the course of my employment with her. And for some reason, on this particular day, I had emptied the dish over the sink, and I had the marbles in my hand, and I was rinsing out the bowl with the other hand, and I was filling up the water, and I remember just having this thought come over me, that just this random thought that said in my mind, it would be really bad if you lost these marbles. And it was just a thought, and I didn't think anything about it, and the thought passed. And I remember specifically putting the marbles back into the dish and seeing the two marbles at the bottom of the bowl and setting them back on the bathroom floor. And then I left, I finished everything up and I left. And when I came back the next week on Monday or Tuesday, the woman that I worked for was outside watering her garden, and the first thing she said to me was, "When you change the water dish in the bathroom, do you do it over the toilet?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Oh, okay, well, they couldn't have fallen down the toilet then." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And she proceeded to tell me that the two blue marbles they were missing. And I told her, well, I always do it over the sink. And the drain in her sink actually has a little, like, drain net. So even if the marbles had fallen in the sink, they couldn't have, it would have been impossible for them to even go down the drain, because even if the net wasn't there, there's a little, like a block thing inside of the drain. So if you dropped something down the drain, it wouldn't be able to go, not even a ring. So she was convinced, of course, that I disassociated and somehow accidentally put the marbles in my pocket, or that I had set them down somewhere and misplaced them, and I didn't. I know I didn't, because I remember specifically having that thought, and I remember being conscious of the marbles and seeing them in the bowl as I set them down. And I was really upset by it, because it felt like a dirty trick that somebody was playing on me, and it made me think again of the key, this sort of material object that sort of seemed to vanish with no logical explanation, and then I'm sort of in trouble, like the person, it's not mine, it belongs to somebody else. And so of course I can't explain to them, well, your object's just disappeared. So then the blame goes on me, but I know that I didn't do it. I know that I didn't lose the key or the marbles in the marble dish. So I tried explaining to her, weird things happened to me. And I had told her about the heater, which was still at that time really fresh. It had happened maybe like a month before. And of course she was saying there was a logical explanation. It's normal for heaters to come on by themselves, and people disassociate when they don't think that they're supposed to lose things or whatever. But I don't buy it. I know that I remember specifically putting the marbles back in the dish, and I remember seeing them in the dish, as I've made that perfectly clear to you. And a few weeks later, she actually found one of the marbles behind there's a little dresser in her bathroom, and she found one of them. But she didn't find the other one. Excuse me, I think I told you that the marbles were blue. They weren't blue. I actually got her a bag of blue marbles as like a kind of a joke, to replace them. But anyway, so she found one, and people have asked me, like, do you think it was the cat that did it? And I will tell you that I don't believe it was the cat. The cat was old. He's since passed away. He was frail. He didn't, play, and nobody will ever convince me that this old cat went to his water dish and decided to scoop the marbles out and hide them. It's funny. I'll believe that they vanished by some supernatural force, but I won't believe that the cat did it. How's that for irony? And the last thing that I want to share with you is more recently, just weeks ago, just a handful of weeks ago, I was at the church where I work one night. It was a Thursday night, which Thursday nights, that's the latest night that I work. So on that particular night, it was just towards the very tail end of my shift, and everybody had gone, and I had locked up everything, and was totally alone in the church. And I heard this thud from upstairs, and I thought that was really odd, and it didn't sound like it came from the other side of the building. We have an adjoining. We rent out the upper half of our upstairs out to a counseling. Well, it's a university where people learn to become therapists. And it didn't sound like it was coming from that side. It sounded like it was coming from the opposite side of the stairway. So on either side of the church where I'm at, there are two stairwells that lead upstairs. So I heard it from the other end where the door, where it is. And I went upstairs to inspect, and just to see. And of course, because sometimes there's offices up there, upstairs. And sometimes the people who work in the offices will come, or they'll stay late, and I won't really know that they're there. And so I went upstairs, and none of the lights were on in the offices, so there was nobody up there. And as I walked past the chapel balcony door, I just had this strange sense of somebody being in there. And I opened up the door, and I looked in, and of course it was all dark, and I didn't see anybody in there. But I just had kind of a creepy feeling. And then I shut the door, and I went back downstairs, and then I kind of just forgot about the whole thing. I didn't even think about it. And so then over the weekend passed, and then I came back to work on Monday, and there was a woman who worked in the office upstairs. And so when it was time for me to leave, she was still doing her work. And so I said, okay, well, I'm going to shut down all the lights, and you can just flip off this last light when you come down, and all the doors are locked and you can go. And so she said, okay, I'll be leaving, within a half hour. And so I didn't really think much about it. And that doesn't usually happen. Usually I'm the last person to leave the building, but that night this woman stayed. And so on Tuesday night, I heard from Jim, who also works in the office. He relayed a story to me. Now keep in mind that I didn't tell anybody about the noise that I had heard upstairs on the bump, or my experience with the creepy feeling with the chapel balcony. I kept that to myself, and I actually forgot about it. So on Tuesday, Jim actually relayed a story to me that over the weekend they were being audited in their office. So he actually stayed and pulled an all-nighter Sunday night and was alone in the church upstairs in his office. And he had said that he was hearing all kinds of activity, and the church was locked, and nobody was there, and he was alone. And he actually described hearing a thud as well, and he actually heard footsteps. Like, he actually thought somebody was going to come around the corner and come into the office, but he heard footsteps walking down the hall by the chapel balcony, and that he heard the door actually open and close. And he went to inspect, and he actually believed that there was like a person, like maybe like a homeless person had snuck into the church or something. And he went and inspected, and nobody was there. And he also described hearing a thud, like I heard. So after I heard that on Tuesday, I thought, well, that's really interesting. And so then on Wednesday, I saw the woman who had stayed on Monday. And I didn't repeat anything to her. I just said, so how did that work for you on Monday? After I left, how did that work for you? Kind of casually. And she told me that Monday night she was leaving the office, and that she heard a thud upstairs. So it's three people who heard a thud upstairs, who none of them related to each other, because Jim didn't tell her, and I didn't tell anybody else. So kind of interesting that happened. So after all of that happened, I was talking with Jim and another person who works there, Greg, and that's actually where I got the inspiration to start this series of videos, was from that recent experience with the thuds up in the church, because we started talking about our experiences, and I shared a few of the stories that I shared with you in the previous videos. And I thought, you know what, why don't I just start telling these stories on video so that I can share them with anybody who's interested. So that is the most recent thing that I've experienced, and that concludes this conglomeration of strange, unusual happenings and experiences. So thank you again for looking at my videos. Stay tuned for the 10th video. I'll be posting it very soon. Until then, take care and be well.